Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. It's a special episode of the Mimi and Greg Show because today is Greg Rucka's birthday. Happy birthday to my dear friend Greg. I am so grateful for Greg's friendship and the many amazing conversations we have shared on this podcast. In this episode, we tackle listener questions about Lazarus Risen 7. Warning, spoiler alerts ahead. He also shares his deep love for collaborating with Michael Lark and the creative process that goes into creating Lazarus. For those of you who do not yet read Lazarus, don't worry, you will. But have enjoyed my 50-plus conversations with Greg, listen on to hear a full-fledged Rucka rant on journalism and social media. It's definitely not one to be missed. For those that don't already know, Greg Rucka is a New York Times best-selling author of hundreds of comics and nearly 24 novels. He is also the writer for his critically acclaimed and award-winning film, The Old Guard, starring Charlize Theron. I'm loving these conversations and hope you are too. If you are, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now on with the show. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Mimi.
As we were kind of commenting off air, this is being recorded during Thanksgiving week. So this is the very thankful week that we're having. And
a very special episode of the Sifu Mimi Chan show.
When you're here, it's the Mimi and Greg show.
Stop it. Stop it.
Actually, sometimes it's the Mimi and Greg show anyway, even when you're not here.
All right. And again, stop it.
We were also talking because when I have your friends on, they're always asking about you. Say, oh, we don't get to see you and everything. But we were talking, and we're going to jump into Lazarus. This is all Lazarus 7, everybody.
This is pre-Lazarus conversation.
This is the quick one, which is that there was a huge social media exodus happening, and I've seen all your friends going, join me on Hive and here and there, and these are like things I've never even heard of. So. Yeah. And you mentioned like, oh, wow, because I don't really do social, but like people are popping up all over for you as well.
Yeah, I created a Mastodon account like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I've never, I think I've posted like 7 things on it in the, intervening years. And in the last couple of weeks, it's like, all of a sudden you have 600 followers. It's like, wow, okay, I guess people are leaving. Until I see that, Mastodon at least seems to have some safeguards in place, until I see something that proves that I'm not being monetized, say at Hive or whatnot. I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been thinking about my stance on social media, and I still find it very, very high. I've been reading a lot of stuff about the results of what Musk is doing and so on. And there are some really persuasive arguments to be made for people who have found communities, for getting the message out to, people in crises and so on. But there was a world before Twitter, and the internet existed before Twitter, and those communities could be found before Twitter. I am not knocking anybody who has reaped those benefits. And it is a sad thing to watch something that has been so very important for so very many people inevitably do what is going to happen here. Mm-hmm. I have no idea if it'll survive. I saw something yesterday that says it's lost like $474 million since taking over.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Dime store Lex Luthor. That's who he is. So.
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of interesting as we're thinking about that, because in our world of Lazarus, and I'm trying to recall, because of course I haven't been very good with the book club and doing the rereads from one, but I'm like, there isn't really social media as far as I can recall.
There's the post, and the post includes in it, at least in Carlisle, an element of social media. You can watch things and you can interact and live chat and so on. But I mean, it's exactly what happens on Twitter now. Everything you're saying can be read by the people who own it. Mm-hmm. You have no privacy. Your DMs are not private. None of that is private. So, it allows for engagement, but of course it was, it's been weaponized for the family's use.
Right. So, and that kind of brings us into
which is not unlike what we're living with social media. So anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was like, interestingly, because I guess the original purpose, I don't know what the original purpose is, to share things, to connect with people, right? Like if we just go base level, but in Lazarus and like you said, what we're seeing now, it's all what you say, weaponized, which is really, I think, the perfect word for it, because on one hand, it just only serves the purpose of the creators. And so you have to think those ulterior motives are
what do you get out of it? And, if it's distraction, if it's data, if it's locational, if it's, intel, the thing that we, so conveniently overlooked in the stampede to places like Facebook and so on was, how can this be free? And it's an old, it's not a new statement, I mean, this was pointed out 20 odd years ago now. No, they're selling you. Mm-hmm. You are literally going to them and saying, here I am. And they go, great, we're going to take all of this and we're going to sell it. You don't get a say in it. You don't get a share of it. And you don't get to say how it's going to be used. But I've been thinking, and I think one of the other differences that you get, just since we are tangentially tying this to Lazarus, is, like I said, I've been thinking about it a lot, is Lazarus does not have, the wastes don't have this.
Yeah.
And
no iPhones, no iDevices.
This device, it's all well and good to have invented a bullet. It does nothing if you haven't also invented a gun. And the combination of the mobile networking platform and social media is what has created, I think, the incredible problem here. That, because that thing turned us into these dopamine addicts.
Yes.
And that ties to, I mean, look, at some point I would be fascinated if humanity survives the next 50 years or whatnot, somebody someday, long after I'm gone, is going to publish the research findings of their in-depth 50-year analysis of the way brain chemistry has changed. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be hard science saying these things changed how we, I mean, there's already been preliminary studies, right?
Right.
About how our attention, our ability to focus has dropped and so on. But I genuinely think there's going to be somebody somewhere is going to go wow, human beings' brains change.
Yeah, the brains change.
It is our brains look different now. So there are certain parts of our brains that are now larger. There are parts of our brains that have atrophied or diminished. And I'm certain of this. I'm absolutely certain of it. So
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah. Just because, you've seen studies of back in the science books and stuff where it's this is where the brains change once they learn to use tools and everything changed and everything. And there's definitive science on depression and addiction and all those things happening with these tools, right? That we're having now. So
I'm sure it was on a Radio Lab or something. But even before the Radio Lab, I remember reading it. There had been a study done by, I want to say, like the I want to say like by King's College or by London Medical School or something, where they had basically done an analysis of a whole bunch of like the black cab taxi drivers' brains and how the brain changed between before they became drivers and after they had learned, quote, the knowledge, right? Because it used to, I don't know if it still is, it used to be if you drove a cab in London, you had to have the knowledge. You had to be able to say, from this place, I can get to, I know these streets. I know where to go. I can get to the nearest hospital, to a fire department, to, I can get anywhere from anywhere. And the ability to rewire the brain to have the knowledge. Like there were studies being like, holy mackerel, like the brain is visibly changed here.
Yeah. Yeah. And
not subtly so. Like if you knew what you were looking at, apparently you would look at before and afters and be like, Jesus Christ, Yeah. So this isn't, we know this happens. And then if you think about that, and this is where it gets scary, then think about all the ways our brains are being altered without us realizing it. And there was a time when I was on Twitter, the first thing I did in the morning was check Twitter.
Yeah.
Right before I even got out of bed. That wasn't regular, but I would lean over and I'd turn off the on and see what happened last night. Right. And that's addictive behavior.
Yeah.
Right. That's addictive behavior. So, yeah. So yes, a nice segue into how our contemporary world is prepping us for dystopia, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Or vice versa. I just realized also, I'm looking at, on our Zoom screen, I'm wearing this white turtleneck because I'm perpetually cold and it's cold here in Portland. Right. And I haven't shaved or trimmed my beard. So this white thing sort of disappears into the collar. So I'm sure the visual there is really, really exciting.
You always look lovely to me.
I look like some weirdo, and you look, like the lovely seafood you are that you don't ever, don't mess with Mimi. So yeah.
That is so not true. But thank you, though. All right, we're going to do actual questions.
Yes, let's do actual questions.
I do feel that they will all have some time and length to them. And
I say this every time. I'll try to be brief.
No, I think this is the
Anyway,
I think this is the point. We like to get inside the brain of Greg, right? We want to know what's going on in there. That's why there's questions.
We want to see how it got altered. Yes, I
understand. The before Lazarus brain and the after Lazarus brain.
I'm much better now, he said, twitching violently.
What's interesting is, and I'm not going to start with this one, or maybe I should, there are questions about how hard this was for you. And so the before Lazarus brain and the post Lazarus brain would be an interesting thing for
can start if that's a specific question about seven.
Specific question about seven is how much struggle, because you and I have talked on this podcast a lot before you started it and while you were writing it, and how much pain you were in and how difficult it was. And, our question comes from, I'm just going to spell it because I'm just going to say it wrong. And it's from our lovely Discord. All of them are from our Discord, essentially. Ooh. So Eleuteutedu.
Yep.
They're a name to that. And sometimes they have like the names in parentheses, and this one doesn't have that. But in any case, was very curious about the parts that kind of give you the most difficult, that required maybe rewriting. And just because you talked about it so much in our podcast, and very loyal listener, thank you for that. And just was kind of curious about that, as well as if Michael, how much of the difficult part was Michael pushing back, or is this just your own desire to be perfect?
The hardest part of the issue was the first half. Like literally the issue breaks in roughly in half. And that first half was a freaking nightmare because we needed the flashbacks, but the flashbacks are all subjective, right? There's never an objective moment in those stories, right? It's always Malcolm's version of events or Hawk's version of events or Hawk's suspicion of the events, right? So untangling everything that I had set up and all of the issues prior, like the logic had to hold all the way through. And it's one thing to have worked knowing these things. It's another thing to then get, 1,000 pages in and go, ta-da, whip off the sheet and you needed to be able to see it and go, oh. And that took a really, really long time because then it becomes a question, right? Just the mechanics of the writing is you only have so much room, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that issue is as big as that issue is. It's an oversized issue. In a run of 44-page quarterlies, that's what, 54, 56 pages of story. That was a lot.
Yeah.
And then it further gets complicated by putting it in front of Michael, who, and I'll just give you just the nature of Michael. I have woken up to emails from him for the last 3 days in a row. And every email is question. The subject is question. And then the first line is, I know I said that was the last question, but. and they are mechanical procedural questions about details that he wants to get right. Stuff that I thought was clear in the script or that I neglected to put in the script that Michael is like, because God is in the details, especially for Michael. And so then I give him that sequence, right? And he's like, I've got to stage this. And there were a lot of people there, right? There's Abby, there's Malcolm, there's Forever, there's Johanna, there's Hawk, there's the Hawk twins. That's 7 people moving about that room. Where they're sitting is important. The whole choreography with the coffee cup is important. Right? I tend to write in scripts, somebody will say something and the next panel will say X reacts. Because to me, the reaction is clear. What are they reacting to? They're reacting to this horrible thing that somebody just said. And Michael, not incorrectly, will reach out and say, what is that reaction supposed to be? Right? X reacts does not help me. I need to know what X reacts is. I quite literally have a panel description in the issue he's writing now that was Michael reacts. And he was like, how? And I was like, not obvious? And then I realized, oh, no, it isn't obvious. The reason that I said that is because it's any number of things at once. The wonderful thing about Michael, one of the many wonderful, magical things about Michael as a collaborator and as an artist, just as a storyteller, is a lot of artists you go to and you say, well, it's kind of the look that you have when you realize that the person you're totally crushed out on has just seen you do something that's really embarrassing, but you're not sure it's totally ruined your chances. And I can say that to Michael and he'd be like, right, I got it. Right? Most artists you go like, is that anger? What is that? And the moment I realized this, just to tell a little story about Michael, is going back to Gotham Central and writing Half a Life. It was the moment when, after Renee has beaten the ever-loving daylights out of Marty Lipari for threatening her and Daria, and she has pummeled Lipari because Lipari has basically said, I'm going to go and rape your girlfriend.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Daria has heard the violence and seen something. So she's come back outside and she's coming over to Renee going, oh my God, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And Renee turns to her and says, go back inside, Dee. It's under control. Go back inside. And at that time, which gives you an idea of how old I was and how long ago this was, I remember writing to Michael in the script, Renee is doing that thing that David Caruso does so well on NYPD Blue, where he's assuming control of the situation and providing that sense of security that he actually has it. And if you ever look at that panel, that's exactly what he drew. The body language, the expression, everything is, you know, it is that moment that Caruso used to do so well on NYPD Blue. And so the great thing, and one of the things that I think really helps Lazarus, is Michael is capable of drawing 3 or 4 different emotions in the same breath.
Yeah.
Right. He excels at conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So,
that is a good statement about Michael.
Yeah. So
I love it. And like the second part of that question, and you may have kind of answered a lot of this, but leading to Risen 7, what changed along the way that directly impacted this issue? Because you always know how it's going to end. And I know like there's middle pieces and things like that, but I guess this is not just about 7. This is kind of like, did things get altered in order for 7 to be?
I didn't think it. I knew we were going to hit a crisis point. I didn't know what that crisis point would be. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I started really this arc that I knew it had to be Hawk making his move. Right. And the result of that and the challenge of it for me, because when I'm writing, like I can step back and I can go, for the most part, I can go objectively, abstractly. I know these people, these human beings, these characters are wretched, horrible people. Very hard to write 7 and not be incredibly sympathetic to Hawk for me. Right? Like I had to absolutely turn into ignoring all the shit that he's done that is vile, and there's a lot of it. Yeah. Right. And going, you know, who's the little boy inside of that? How does that happen? And by the same token, doing that for Malcolm. And Michael and I went around on it. Michael didn't want Malcolm's monologue. He didn't like Malcolm saying, you know, you've all forgotten what it was like.
Right.
And I was like, we have to have that. And he was like, but I don't think we're telling anybody anything new. I don't think they don't know this. And I was like, I think you're mistaken. I think because you and I have been working on this for 10 years and we've talked about it, you're presuming information that the audience never had. This is the first time Malcolm actually says out loud, oh, yes, I did every single thing I've done on purpose for a specific reason, which was this.
Yeah.
Right? I couldn't beat it. I had to destroy it from the inside. Malcolm's motivation is entirely anti-capitalist, right? He literally looked at the situation and said, you cannot beat these people from the outside because every mechanism that could do it has been destroyed by them. Government won't do it. They're beholden. The people can't do it because they don't have a voice anymore. They have allowed themselves to be distracted or manipulated and not even allowed. Again, we go back to the social media stuff, right? Mm-hmm. The only way to fix this, another way to put it would have been to say it was kill or cure, right? We had to do the most extreme measure. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he and Hawk are talking about in the issue is coming in it comes in an inverted order because Hawk says prior to that, we were going to change the world. We were going to make it better. Did we? Is it, Malcolm? Is it better? And Malcolm's response is, I'm not finished yet, which is ideally very chilling, but also very telling.
Yeah.
Right? That then just a few pages later, he says, no, this is what I was doing and why. I set out to do this. And if you plug that into I'm not finished yet, one wonders what the rest of the shape of the plan is. So I always knew the moment was coming, but I never knew how the moment would execute.
Right.
And I always knew that the moment would be ultimately defined by Forever turning to her father and saying no. Mm-hmm. You know, the single most important panel in this series so far is Forever saying no. Mm-hmm. I'm, just the one word. So
yeah.
And then the back half of the issue, I always knew was going to happen, but I had no idea how Forever was going to get 8 out of Sequoia. I thought for sure Marisol was going to die. I mean, I went into the issue being like, well, Marisol's dead this time. I mean, she's going to die this issue.
Right. All right. Well, I'll take Bethany and James over Marisol then. We're good.
Look,
but it doesn't
there were
mean
a lot
she's
of people.
Safe. It doesn't mean
there were a lot of people walking around with crosshairs on them in 7, and Marisol had been wearing crosshairs for issues. Issues and issues.
Yeah.
Because dramatically, it made sense to me that Marisol would die protecting her kids, trying to help them escape. It was a sacrifice she would make.
Yeah.
But it would have been false. What I was right. If she had ended up dead, it would have been a forced move. And also, Michael is I'm a melodramatic romantic softie. Michael acts like he is such a. I mean, no, you can't kill him. Oh my God, don't do that. And kill him instead. Like he wants every bad person to
die.
Yeah, he wants all the bad guys to be eviscerated, and he doesn't want anything bad at all to happen.
Yeah. I'm with him.
He did not like. I was like, yeah, Marisol's probably gonna die. He was like, don't do that. No, I don't like that. I don't like that. I was like,
oh my goodness. Yes. Well, I know that no one is safe, but at the same time, I'm grateful I can at least hold on to that for now. Yeah. And speaking of that, like for me, it definitely was an important monologue and very powerful and something I did need to hear vocalized, right? Because it was like, he could have just been this maniacal, power hungry, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, see that whole issue, seeing the way he was built up and what he saw, how he grew up, all of these different things, the lovesick, quote unquote, college student to the here's what I'm seeing, and him to verbalize it, I thought was important. And for me, I need that,
And one of the things that I've tried to do in this series is to say almost every single person in this world, with very few exceptions, is unequivocally awful, right? But in their awfulness, there are the human beings, like the real, like how did they get there? It was important. I wanted the reader to wonder, Malcolm talks about his plan and he says, I had you, meaning Abby, I didn't need her, which is horribly cold. But I want the reader to actually be able to ask, did he love Leia? Like, was he willing for this plan, which is megalomaniacal. I mean, it absolutely is. The ego required to say, I myself am the only person who can save the world, and this is the way I will do it. Mm-hmm. Let's not talk about that level of insanity. But it says something. It is worth entertaining. Maybe he had fallen in love with Leia. Maybe he hadn't. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe it was legit. When you pretended something for a long time, it tends to become real.
Yeah.
And what we know about Malcolm, and I kind of think it's conveyed in when he talks about Leia before it all starts coming out, there is a wistfulness there, which in its own way makes it even worse, right? What's worse? That it was all calculated and cold, and it was all sociopathic performance, mm-hmm. or it was a plan that was continuing to evolve. And here is this woman that he has fallen for, who is brilliant and who can bring these things in. And here's her brother, who he likes, right? Like they you know, and I want those questions. I want there to be gray areas and wiggle room. Not everything needs to be definitive. When you do something like, and I get this a hell of a lot these days when dealing with Hollywood, you get notes, particular studio notes. They don't want any doubts. Mm-hmm. And they're impatient. They also want to know right now, why did they do this thing? And I want you to be able to think about it and to be able to go, no, absolutely say no. Malcolm is a son of a bitch and a psycho. Yeah. And this was his plan all along. That's fine. But if somebody else can look at it and go, yeah, but maybe it's more complicated than that. That's what I want. I want that complexity.
Yeah. And I think those characters are constantly doing that to us in this, especially. I mean, I refer to this all the time. Beth. Yeah. I refer to all the time. I'm like, these characters I'm dead set on hating forever. And there's never going to be any humanization to them. And then you have to go and like do your amazing magical writing thing and give them so much depth. And it's there. And, speaking of Malcolm, it's kind of like another question was, is he not a prototype, but like, is there a comparative, just kind of seeing, like, I love drawing lines to today because they're just so obvious in there. But like this question is Xi Jinping kind of a prototype? Because arguably right now, maybe one of the most powerful people on the planet, and how he was influenced, kind of grew up, not commoner, but like seeing how Russia fell and was like, I'm not going to let this happen. And these are the mistakes that were made. Things were, I was brought up this way, like things were done differently then. And just what the greater good for 1.4 billion people here is the right thing. Right. So, I mean, do you see that parallel or?
Not really, but that's mostly because it's an after the fact parallel as opposed to an inception parallel.
Right.
Like I absolutely can see it now, that we're 10 years into the series. At the start, no. At the start, I knew I knew Malcolm's plan. But he was mentally, this combo. He was never meant to be like, oh, you're supposed to see Bezos, you're supposed to see Steve Jobs, that was never the intention.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, Hawk, right, which the name is Coke, right? Hawk is named after the Koch brothers, right? That was very deliberate, because I wanted that sense of, no, this is a manifest thing.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, it wasn't. It is becoming more evident. And if you go and you read, your histories, like you'll see, we've got a long list of like recent, and we got it with the orange shit given. You saw it with Hussein. they're working from playbooks that have already been written.
Right.
Like they're not DeSantis is too. Right. These guys are not reinventing the wheel. What they're doing is they're going like, oh, this works. This is how you do it. Putin absolutely is working on everybody's playbook here. It's like, okay. And because the same stuff works over and over again. I distract you. I blame all your troubles on somebody else, in particular, an identifiable ethnic, religious, gender, sexuality minority. I tell you that they're the reason your life sucks. I point that anger, and then I can get over here and I can literally, rape your goat, and you will cheer me on while I do it, because you've bought into not that I'll make it better, but that I'll make it worse for these people than it is for you. Mm-hmm. Right. The great quote that our friend Spencer bandies about, and it wasn't his, right? But it's the cruelty is the point. Mm-hmm. The cruelty is absolutely the point.
Yeah.
When Saddam Hussein took control in Iraq, he literally was working off of chapter and verse off of Stalin. You know what I mean? So what has happened now is we have greater sophistication in how we can apply these things, because again, we go back to here's a pocket computer and here's information / misinformation / disinformation platform that delivers the vector super efficiently and quickly.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. We have so many people to look at that are using the same playbook, and that we can't prevent this.
We can. We're not, is the problem. And when I say we, right, our power is limited because of the way the money and the structure is built. We absolutely need the government to step in and say, the internet is a public use. It's ours. It's ours. We made it. If you want to use it, the following rules have to apply. Right? But they haven't done that, and they won't do that because Mark Zuckerberg has more money than God. Right? And the list goes in, Peter Thiel and so on. So these people who now have all this money have now achieved, it used to be that there was a conviction and a belief in at least some rules. What has happened in the last 15, 20 years with this level of wealth is that they quite literally believe the rules do not apply to them and should not apply to them. And therefore they get to rewrite the rules. So you get Peter Thiel literally saying democracy doesn't work. It shouldn't be allowed, right? It's actively said, I want it gone. That's what the money is going for. That's what these Republicans are getting their funding to do, right? We're going to have a constitutional Congress so we can change the Constitution to enshrine these people in their privileged status, right? If the system was working in any degree of responsibility, if the checks and balances were actually still there, which have been destroyed specifically by the Republicans, right? Because the last check was the courts, and they've broken it. The Supreme Court has no legitimacy. They sit there and they complain about, oh my God, you read these articles, Chief Justice worries that the court has lost its legitimacy. Yeah, you absolutely have. You guys are illegitimate. You're absolutely a bullshit kangaroo Congress up there. You got no business doing your jobs. You've got one justice who literally was involved in the insurrection. You've got one justice who is part of a right-wing, messianic religious offshoot cult, right? That's 2 out of 9 already. Okay? And the list goes on and on. So the court has no legitimacy.
Yeah.
Now, if it had some legitimacy, it would say, you know what? Money is not political speech. Mm-hmm. It's not. You cannot buy this. You don't get to do that.
Yeah.
Right? But they haven't done that. And therefore, we live in an era of glorious whataboutism where fucking Elon Musk says, it's freedom of speech, unless you're making fun of me, in which case you're banned. And we're going to put it to a vote. Should Trump get his account back? Right? Okay, well, that's not a vote, asshole. That's you polling a bunch of bots, and literally it's literally me going to your 5-year-old students and saying, would you rather have ice cream than have to do class today? Right?
Yes.
What do you think the percent of that vote's going to be that raises their hand and says, oh, ice cream, please?
Yes.
Right? Okay. It's bullshit to then turn around and say, oh, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. No, it isn't. Because that wasn't the voice of the people, asshole. That wasn't the voice of the people.
Yeah.
And you pretending that it was does not make it so. And yeah, so we were talking about Lazarus stuff. You better ask another question. Because again, I've totally failed on short answers. Let's.
I have this is going to be a short one for you. So ask Greg if Malcolm has ever been to therapy.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. No.
I figured not.
No. Nope,
Narcissists don't need therapy.
I'm not sure he's a narcissist as much as. No, you know what? Maybe he is a narcissist. My view on that is this. Malcolm knows everything he has done, and he has justified it as necessary. And, I believe, back in like post-poison, he's walking with Johanna and he says, I know my list of sins better than you. Mm-hmm. Like, you'll not shame me with them.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. He does not go to therapy because he does not need anybody telling him, maybe you shouldn't be this way. Yeah. Right? He damn well knows.
Yeah.
What, he knows. And this is the other thing. This goes back to the Leia moment.
Okay.
The implication, and again, remember, every one of those flashbacks is subjective. We never will know what actually happened or how it happened.
Yes.
So a Malcolm who is snarling and sneering as he drives a syringe into Leia isn't necessarily accurate. Right? We don't know how it went down. We don't know.
Yeah. And I guess this sort of answers our other question, which, was in the Discord already. And I'm sure it was more that an observation of that we aren't granted that fly on a wall perspective, whereas we literally are having to just be a little bit like, well, this is told through narration. So we're seeing it through this side and we're seeing it, like you said. And I think this is just the I want more kind of thing. I want the answers. I want the answers now, Greg. But
sure.
I guess the real question there is like, was there a lot of back and forth between you and Michael about whether we would get that omniscient view of the past, or was it always set going through the flashbacks with the narration being the current perspectives of Malcolm and Jacob?
It was always going to be subjective.
Okay. And Michael agreed with that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. The meeting, though, the initial version of the meeting of Malcolm and Leia in Harvard Square, Harvard Yard, I believe is what it's technically called. I initially wrote it without dialogue so that Hawk sets it up and then you just had the page and it was all silent. There was no narration over it, that you did not have any idea at all what was said.
Yeah.
And then basically, as we were getting ready to go to press with it, we were all looking at it and going, it doesn't work. Like, we need his narration to continue through it.
Okay.
But again, you look at Hawk's word choice, and his word choice is very much, I don't know. Right? I imagine this. I imagine that.
Yeah.
This is what she made it seem like, but I don't know. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. And Brad's question is, the goodbye between Beth and Forever shows how Forever's journey changes the relationship of women in this family from fearing Malcolm and supporting his rule to being willing to support each other in defiance. Was this a conscious choice or simply how the story evolved?
I think it's a subconscious choice. It's a really good question. I think it's going to be one of those things that you'll inevitably get in my writing when I have, when I'm writing a bunch of women. That's just, it is naturally going to evolve in it.
Yeah.
Bethany's relationship with Malcolm, she don't get to see a lot of. She loves him. That's her dad.
Yeah.
And that's her dad before the world ended, right? Like, that was dad before Year X. She was there before Year X. Her pain and her crisis, as starts in Risen, at failing him, and at what she's really grappling with is not, I'm not as smart as mom. What she's really grappling with is, my dad's going to die. Right?
Yeah.
And like I say, this is complicated stuff because Malcolm's absolutely abusive. Like, he is an abusive parent. And with malice aforethought, he has always pushed his children and played them off against each other and directed them to be what he needed them to be. He is a shitty dad.
Yeah.
Right? But you talk to you talk to a lot of survivors of child abuse. Part of the trauma is they love their parents. And they want their love, even if they know better.
Right.
Even if they go, they're not worth it. You can't tear that out and throw it away. Forever's operating principle at the start is, I want to be loved. Daddy, love me. I'll do whatever you want if you tell me you love me. I will go right to the edge of killing my brother.
Yeah.
Because that's what a good girl does for her daddy when he says so, right? But one of the things that I really wanted going on with Beth, and again, if you look at her throughout all of Risen, she starts in such a place of self-loathing.
Yeah.
And has an epiphany moment, as she describes it to James, of being like, I don't like who I am, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And sort of seeing herself in that naked context leads to her sitting down next to 8, and instead of like doing the horrible thing that we know she is capable of doing, basically says, okay, so don't be throwing your controller at the post screen anymore, honey. Right? Leaving both Marisol and 8 to go, where's Beth and what have you done with her?
Right. They're like, was she just nice?
Nice, yeah. But by necessity, that's going to lead to a self-reflection. And I also think it's really important, and she says this as well, Forever's number 7, 8 is number 8. She was the one who had to put down how many of them. She's the one who has had to work on their parts. She's the one who's been asked to dehumanize these human beings, to reduce them to parts.
Yeah.
And that toll is an incredible toll. And in that moment, and it is, and I admit it's melodramatic. I absolutely admit it. But, when Forever says, I'm not a monster. Right. And Beth's response is, no, you're not. Like I say, that is a melodramatic, over the top line. Like, I know that in a million other contexts, I would have been told you cannot cut it. Cut it. But in this scene, it is the thing, right? Because it is Beth saying, no, but I have been. We all are for what we have done, right? So, in true, fashion, I'm going to make you love her just before I whack her.
Yes, yeah. I'm aware. I was like, I know what's coming. And then James is reaching for the gun. I'm like, damn you, Greg.
Well, but see, here's the other thing. James has always been a piece of shit.
Right. You've mentioned. I'm like, yeah, it's true. It's so true.
It was real easy for people to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
First issue.
I know.
The first thing he does is betray her confidence.
I know.
He is a brown-nosing, cowardly, spineless turd who has done anything he was asked to do in the hopes that he would survive a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
And the most terrifying thing in the world is that he's going to blame us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I know. And it gets everybody killed.
Yep.
his desire to please Malcolm. And it was so interesting to go back to issue 1 and go, oh, wait, Greg's totally right. So weird.
He's been like this the whole time. There have been moments in the series where he's done a really good job and he isn't unsympathetic. Right. And that's the thing that throws you. It's not that he looks at 8 and he goes, my little experiment, I will drop you in the test tube. Yeah. He is capable of warmth. He is capable of empathy. But when push comes to shove, it's always going to be him.
Yes.
He will always choose him over you.
Exactly. Yeah. And we know so many people like that. So, well, it's annoying because like you said, they're not the most obvious villain.
Yeah.
But they're doing so much damage along the way that you don't recognize till you're like,
he's toxic.
Crap. Toxic. Yeah. He's everyone too.
Yes, he is.
To Bethany. It's just
to 8 going to everybody.
Yeah. Ugh. Anyways. Well, all right. Question is wondering, and a lot of people are always interested in your research, of course, because you go so deep into the rabbit holes, but like wondering about the websites, newspapers, or any other sources Greg utilizes, not only to keep up to date as a citizen, but also for story creation. He remembers when Twitter was a good place to check out articles and sources back when he was on the platform. He meant your Twitter, by the way, was a good place to check. But he's also interested in news stories regarding intelligence, spycraft, national security matters.
I actually have stepped away from a lot of the intelligence and spycraft stuff just because almost every source that I used to go to is now so ideologically compromised. Like Stratfor used to be, like 10 years ago, I used to, at least I could see their bias.
Yeah.
Now their bias has become so overt, in my opinion, that they're untrustworthy. I read newspapers. I still read, Le Monde when I can. I read The Guardian. I read The Washington Post, even though they piss me off 75% of the time, which is better than the New York Times is 95% of the time. People like Spencer Ackerman.
Yep.
Who has a great newsletter.
Yes, he actually said, I went down the Spencer Ackerman hole and now I'm obsessed with him just as much as I am with Greg.
I will actually, you know what?
Except I need a dictionary for Spencer's newsletter.
Fair enough.
He's such an amazing writer. I'm like, my mind. I'm like, Oscar, read this and translate, please.
Yeah, please. What does this mean?
It's so advanced.
I get a lot of stuff from Troutman, actually. And I'm not sure where he gets it. Eric Troutman is one of these guys who I think has like, aggregate feeds set up and sort of
where it's like all different screens.
But I actually am in a weird sort of curation phase right now and sort of reevaluating sources.
Okay.
So I guess I'm not sure who asked this. Who was it?
Scott.
It was Scott. Scott from Scott on the Discord.
I believe on the Discord. Yes.
Well, Scott, if you are on the Discord, I will. When we come back with Fallen #1, I'll actually make a point of putting in the letter column like where I am going and what I am looking at. Mm-hmm. Because it's always evolving. Right. And I also have to admit, and I'm going to be honest about this, I have sort of pulled back a lot from daily news during the Trump administration. Yeah. Because it was emotionally necessary for me. And I am tired of, like I said, I'm tired of journalistic objectivity being used as the excuse for whataboutism or providing equal time to things that should never, ever get equal time, right? Because the end result of that is we run a one-column essay on why the Jews should be allowed to live and another column on why all the Jews have to be gassed. And if you do that, that's not objectivity. That's giving a platform to a hateful idea that is destructive to humanity and society, not just a group of people. And you are failing in what your fucking job is as a piece of journalism, as a news media. Mm-hmm. But we are in this trap of going, well, his opinion about why fascism is good should run in the Washington Post. It's like, no, it should not. It should not. Period. Paragraph. Some things are not about freedom of speech, right? Some things are not, like I said, there's this myth that says, oh, you got to show both sides. No, you really don't. You really don't. And the way I can prove that to you is the next time you see a story about the child sex trafficking ring busted, why are we not seeing a story about the poor pedophiles who only want to have sex with a 6-year-old? Okay? Because it's morally reprehensible and we know it's wrong and it's criminal. Okay. So don't tell me, right, that, well, we're just being fair. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. What you're doing is you're providing a voice and a platform and a megaphone to destructive authoritarian ideas that are quite literally working to destroy this country, if not modern civilization in many ways. I got no time for it. I will not entertain it. But the end result of that was when I'm shouting at NPR, while I'm having my morning coffee back in, 2018, mm-hmm. I had to really pull back and sort of curate what I was looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I am fucking sick and death to, we need to have both sides. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Some things, not all the things.
Yeah, it's frustrating to not be able to have that reliability and that we keep making the same mistakes. When I say we, I mean the journalists keep making the same mistakes in giving free advertising to the people that are just catastrophic to.
But it seems to be this American thing, and in particular, and I don't get it, right? Because Fox News doesn't do it. Fox News absolutely doesn't do it. Fox News doesn't pretend to any sort of objectivity. Mm-hmm. And it's not about what they say, but literally looking at what they do. They don't want objectivity. They don't pretend, right? So why the fuck, right? Just take on the British model. You pick up the Guardian, you know the slant you're going to get. They tell you, right? If you pick up the Daily Mail, you know the slant. If you pick up the Telegraph, you know the slant. You pick up the Independent, it's in the goddamn title, right? That's their slant. I have no problem with a Fox News that says we are a conservative, far-right mouthpiece. Go ahead. Do what it says on the tin, right? Don't pretend then you're doing anything else. Don't pretend it's fair and balanced. Stop it, right? If CNN really wants to be, the most respected voice in journalism or whatnot, okay, act like it. I am sick to death of it.
Really?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah, here's another Rucka rant. But I mean, and again, it goes back to the social media of it all and so on.
It's almost like journalists are like, oh, we need to compete with social media. So we need to be.
They absolutely, I need the clicks. And also, what happens if they shout at us for not being fair? Guys, whataboutism is not an argument. Whataboutism is just a distraction. Yeah. Like, I love soccer. I love soccer.
I know.
Like, it's the only sport I care about. I cannot watch the World Cup.
I know.
I can't do it. I cannot bring myself to do it. Right? My burning hatred for FIFA right now is incandescent. And I read, Infantino saying, I am an immigrant and I am gay and I am a migrant worker. And I know you're fucking not. And you insult and diminish all the women and all the members of the queer, and I use queer in the most blanket term, community. I mean, it's just, and again, it's like, you're playing whataboutism, Easter, Europe should not have any rights to comment. We should be saying sorry for 3,000 years. Guess what? It is possible to admit to having made horrible, horrible mistakes, to recognize the horrible crimes we have committed in our past, to seek to be better. That does not mean you also cannot at the same time look over there and say, that's not right. The whole thing about when a woman is raped, if she reports it, she gets arrested because your fucked up laws provide the only consent has to come from the male. So literally, you report your assault, the cop turns and says, did you rape her? He says, no. She totally asked me to come over. Okay, well, she's going to prison and you're free to go. That's not whataboutism. That's not respecting the culture. Mm-hmm. It isn't. What that is slavery.
Yeah, it's very
gender and sexual slavery. Yeah. So, I got no time for it. Like I said, I got no time for it. But apparently the mainstream media does. Anyway, yeah. So, yes, next time we talk, will hopefully be before the World Cup has been decided. And we'll see what other things have happened with that particular shit show.
Oh, I'm sure nothing's going to happen between now and then. I mean, it's just a daily kind of thing now. There were times where you and I would talk and it's like, oh, literally the world was on fire. Like every week it was just, we couldn't even keep up. And we were literally talking every week at the time. Yeah. And so now it's just, it's kind of an impossibility. And
well, I mean, it's nice to know that in some places, the fires have been at least banked, not put out. Yeah. We have other ones, let's say, look, man, the moon mission is awesome. That's exciting. Yeah, that's spectacular. Yes. Science is good.
Science, yes. Those of us who believe in it.
Yes. Well, those of us who believe in it are going to survive.
Yeah.
There was a piece, I think my brother sent it to me. Let me see if I can find this. Which in its own way, and I admit this is kind of sick, but funny. Yeah, it was an article from Vice.com. Almost twice as many Republicans died from COVID before the midterms than Democrats. Quote, is it possible that anti-vax Republicans dying from COVID affected the midterms? Quote, our study can't answer that, but it certainly seems plausible given just how stark the differences in vaccination rates have been among Democrats and Republicans.
Before you read all that, I was already thinking it. And I was like, I bet you I know what he sent you.
Well, and it's like...
It just doesn't apply to Florida, apparently.
No, but, the fix was in all along. So,
yeah.
And also, frankly, your governor, your governor's race was not a great race. You had a weak candidate going up against DeSantis. One wonders what would have happened if he had had a strong one.
Yes. And no, but also the gerrymandering here that was done pre-election really made all the difference. Because if you look at the numbers, this does not represent our state at all.
You got it.
But it was effective. They were effective.
That's the way they play, right?
Yeah, because very effective cheaters.
Yeah. We don't want people to have a voice. We want people to say what we want them to say.
Yeah,
so we will absolutely. And again, and I go back to this all the time. If you're that afraid of people's votes, maybe you should be asking yourself why.
Yep.
Like maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe the problem is you. Maybe the problem is saying Jesus is coming is not actually the winning platform you think it is. I wrote Bravo about, in 2014, 2015. The cabal there is entirely a messianic cabal. This is not new. We all saw it coming. Literally, people don't seem to get it. A lot of the decisions that we are suffering under are decisions being made by an ultra-right Christian fascist with a hyphen, Christian fascist offshoot that genuinely believes they're doing God's will. And they are being financed by people who don't care if it's God's will or not. They just know that if this goes, they get more money. Mm-hmm. And that's why they can quite literally look at Donald Trump and go, he's not that bad. Right? Mm. Like, it doesn't matter how many times he's been married. It doesn't matter how many rape allegations, it doesn't matter any of it. It doesn't matter because he's chosen. We're sick. Yeah. We're really, really sick. And when we say that science is the cure, well, the greatest enemy of science is religion. That's not to say all religion is science's enemy. Yeah. Many great scientists have been very religious and very spiritual. They can absolutely coexist harmoniously.
Yeah.
But right now, there's a particular flavor of religion that is literally at war with, and in many alarming quarters, beating science. And our obligation there is to educate ourselves in the science.
Yeah.
Religion doesn't allow for saying that was wrong, right? It's got, here are the rules and you follow them. It doesn't go, oh, that rule was wrong. Oh, we misread that, right? Yeah. Science is entirely about going, whoop, that didn't go the way we thought it would. That screwed up.
Yeah.
That theory's wrong. Let's fix it.
Right. Because there's continuous trial and error, trial and error, testing things, questioning things. How dare we question things? Well,
and not getting the expected result is the best thing for an experiment.
Yeah.
Right? Because it leads to new understanding. It's and maybe we should have all seen it coming. I mean, the historical record says, look, the last time we hit a millennium, things got really apeshit crazy for about 100 years. We should have expected it with this one too. And maybe some people did. I think we thought we were a little smarter about it and a little more cool about it and so on.
Because we're so advanced.
Yeah. Turns out, no, a lot of people are retreating to it. Mm-hmm. I get it. Life is complex. There's a lot of weird shit going on. There's so much we don't understand about why things are happening and how they happen. It's much easier to say, God, I just surrender it all. God, there's my answer. But even if you believe a belief in a divinity, a God, in a Jesus who does not want you, to an Allah, pick, who does not want you to use the intellectual faculties that you have been blessed with, that does not want you to think, I find antithetical to any quote unquote kind and generous and loving God. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I agreed.
So
makes no sense. By the time this airs, it would have been your birthday, sir. So happy birthday.
Thank you. Yes. And I'm looking forward to a day where I do nothing.
Very good.
Won't happen, but I'm looking forward to it.
Oh,
yeah,
we can try. We can hope, and we will hope in science. And
yes, we will.
Look to that. Look to that for our.
We will
hope,
believe in science, and we will look at beautiful pictures of the universe and the James Webb Telescope. Coming back to us, and we will look at physics, and we will thank Dr. Fauci for his service. And we will get boosted, and we will take our vaccinations, and we will
survive.
Not stop. Yeah. No, we're going to do more than survive. Because because we can. We are obligated to. And you know this because you're out there teaching all the time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, we're talking, like I said, this is our very special Thanksgiving episode. There's a lot I am thankful for. One of the things I'm thankful for is it's not nearly as bad as it could be.
Yeah.
I am thankful for all of the people I have the opportunity to meet and talk to and listen to who are engaging with the world and working to make it better.
Yeah.
There are good things. It's important to remember that. So
100%. So thank you for reminding us of that. And until next time, Mr. Rucka.
You take care. I hope you have a great holiday with the family. Thank you.
Hello to everybody and love to everybody.
Love to everybody on your end. Thank you, Mimi.
All right. Bye-bye. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.